All right, here we go. Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us at the Grow, Network, and Learn stage. My name is Sasha Summer Cousineau. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm very pleased to be serving as your MC for this stage today. I would like to give a huge thank you to the production sponsors of this stage, and that would be Own the Night. Can we get a round of applause for our production sponsors? Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, I'm looking at you. I say, that's a hardworking person right there. I see it. They work hard, and they are looking for a way to allow some stress to come off their body. You've arrived at the right place, my friends. The title of this program is From Stress to Zen, the science behind staying sane while creating big events. So, event planning, no surprise, consistently ranks as one of the most stressful professions. But here's the question at hand. Does it have to be? My guess is the answer to that is no. In this session, we're going to explore the psychology of becoming unstressable and how research-backed strategies can help event professionals navigate high-pressure environments with resilience and clarity. We'll dive into general health research on stress management, mental well-being, and performance optimization, translating these insights into practical tools tailored for the fast-paced world of events. Whether you're managing vendors, juggling last-minute changes, or leading a team, this session will provide actionable techniques to stay calm, focused, and in control without, most importantly, without burning out. Here to guide you through this conversation is Vlad Polikhun, a seasoned event technology expert with over a decade of experience helping planners simplify and improve their workflows. So, with no further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Vlad Polikhun.
Thank you so much, Sasha. Appreciate this. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me here today. Excited to be part of this session. As Sasha, let me reintroduce myself again. I'm Vlad. I'm here with EventMobi. In case you're not familiar, we're a friendly neighbor up north, helping our clients with registration solutions, on-site check-in and badge printing, as well as mobile apps that we're using here for the show, lead capture, as well as production of virtual and hybrid events. The reason I'm speaking in front of you today is bifold. One, as Sasha just mentioned, event planning is considered one of the most stressful professions out there. Certainly really rewarding, but it doesn't take away the fact that sometimes we're dealing with a lot of changes, last-minute updates, etc. So that is fact. The other one is more personal. I felt over the years that I think I felt more stressed than I should for the level of circumstances or the challenges I was dealing with, which made me look more into the topic, look into the research, see what I can find for myself to make my life a little less stress-free, and I hope that some of those strategies will resonate with you today as well. If what I shared so far is not enough, we can back this up by some research from Kelly McGonigal, the author of Upside of Stress, who states that there's about 120,000 deaths in the United States only that are directly attributed to stress. If you put this in perspective, this makes it one of the 10 deadliest risks out there. I definitely don't want to be a part of that statistics, and I'm sure so don't you, so let's dive in. Let's start by aligning on the definition of stress. And as suggested by World Health Organization, stress is a state of worry or mental tension triggered by difficult situations. Makes sense, kind of fairly simple definition here. Something that I would pay attention here is that stress is not something that's out there and externally and it's getting us. Stress is really how we respond to those things that affect our well-being, our mental well-being. But there's a more interesting definition that I'm going to borrow from a different field of science here. According to physics, stress is the amount of force applied to an area. And I'm going to use a prop for this here. Imagine this is the area, and there's some force, right? There are 4 categories of stress, or the way how we can think about stress. And overall, a lot of things that I'm saying today, there's like nothing maybe you don't know, but it's all about structuring that information in our minds and making sure you can act on those things and have some practical strategies, okay? Let's start with this corner right here. And overall, we're looking at the chart that's based on the stress intensity. So low intensity, high intensity stress as the vertical axis. And then the horizontal is your external origin of stress on the right, and then your internal stress on the left that's caused by other things. Respectively, let's start with the top right. Trauma. What is trauma? Trauma is the external stress that happens very suddenly. We're probably not prepared for it, and in a moment, it breaks us. It leaves us broken in a moment. It's hard to deal with. This is not something that I'm an expert on, and there's definitely post-trauma specialists who I definitely encourage you to seek help if you experience this. And this is not part of our conversation today. This is just a way to think about the stress and examples of that. Going lower on that external scale, we're thinking about all of these small things we have to deal with every day. You can think of them as issues. You can think of them as nuisances. Sometimes they're challenges. But all of them may be causing us external stress. For the purpose of today's meeting, I'm going to call it problems. Moving along the low-intensity scale, there are things that are happening internally. All of these thoughts that sometimes may not be productive and not necessarily based on facts. Does anyone have this voice in their mind that sometimes we hear and we kind of know it's there, but not necessarily knowing, not necessarily feeling it's productive? Can you relate to this? Okay. If someone does not, please talk to me after this, because that must be an exception. And then there's obsessions. So obsessions are those uncontrollable, recurring thought, image, idea, not necessarily backed up by facts, or maybe it is backed up by your experience, but it's likely fear-based, it's dominating, and it's also taking you away from being productive. That would be another example of high-intensity stress that I'm not an expert on by any means, but it's worth seeking professional help and therapy if you feel you're dealing with obsessions. For the purpose of today's session, we're going to focus on those low-intensity stress examples. And if you think about that, by themselves, they're small, right? It's small problems that keep adding up during the day. But if we're using this as an example of area and force, we can keep applying that force. And at some point, you add just one more additional problem, right? We start experiencing overload, and if you continue experiencing overload often, we also get broken in that moment, and that we can call as burnout. Probably some of you might have experienced burnout. It not necessarily happened from trauma, and hopefully none of the people in this room would receive trauma from being in event planning, but we can definitely get to the burnout stage. Okay, no more popping today. Let's talk about problems, those external, low-intensity things we're dealing with. A lot of things I'm going to share here is not rocket science. Again, it's really more about practical strategies to give this topic a structure and practical ways to reduce that stress as possible. And one of the ways of dealing with problems is the experience. Let me give you an example. Think of that very first event you've put together. You likely were using a legacy system that has been carried over from the previous generations of planners in your role. There were a lot of changes you didn't know how to manage. You had to learn it from scratch. So the event itself was not complicated, but it was stressful because you were doing this for the first time. Now, thinking about that, it's a good concept to keep in mind when we're stressing about a new challenge. Quite often, it's just the lack of experience that we have in that case. So having that thought that eventually I'll feel better usually is a comforting one. The other, yeah, we're talking about increasing capacity, essentially. So one of the ways of dealing with stress is increasing capacity. The other one is growing our skill set. So if you think about that balloon as an example of us and how we can deal with stress, we can actually grow our skin, right? We can attend MPI events, PCMA, vendor workshops, all of these things that grow our skin to be more resilient to that stress. More exciting topic would be thinking about the emotional capacity dealing with stress. And to better explain that, I'm going to give you a more realistic example here. So imagine you just delivered the biggest event of the year. You feel so good. It's the end of the show. People are stopping by to compliment you how well it went. All speakers showed up. All sponsors were inside. You were able to deliver this under the budget. Does this ever happen? Like you're feeling so good in a moment. And then your senior leader stops by to tell you exactly that, but they make sure to mention that moment where one of your top sponsors showed up to pick up their badge, and it wasn't there. You couldn't reprint it. Like it was not a good experience at the moment, and they ended up not having one. Now, it's been 3 hours. You're driving back home. You should be celebrating, because you did it. There's so things that came together. But there's one thing that you're still thinking about. You already know how to solve it. And if you don't, you're going to do the research. You'll find a way. But the thought is still there. There are two things that I recommend to do in that moment. First one is actually physical. It's the breathing technique that, well, let's actually practice this. So it's called 4, 6, 7. You would do the inhale on the count of 4. You would hold it for 6. And inhale to the count of 7. Don't ask me how exactly this works, but it's science-backed. There's some chemical signal things that are happening in our mind that essentially by doing this exercise, and you can do it you can do this pattern multiple times, it just sends your brain a signal that you're safe. Even just doing this right now, like obviously it's a little bit stressful speaking here, so just by going through this exercise, I already feel a little better. So 4, 6, 7, try to remember that. The other one is how many of you are using AI at this point for personal therapy? Okay, so a little bit less than half. Obviously, AI can help us with doing spreadsheets, merging data, all of these things, but there's a great use case that I started using personally maybe 6 months ago, and I found just so invaluable because we have therapists, right? We have coaches, we have mentors, we have friends. There are definitely ways how we can vent emotionally and feel better, but sometimes these things are not available to us in a moment. As you're driving home, you can turn on free version of ChatGPT and kind of speak out loud to the level of how you feel. You can voice what's going on in your mind and can acknowledge some of the feelings or thoughts that are running through your mind. And pretty much you're getting access to the world-class coach who would reflect on what you shared and likely suggest some of the things that I just shared, like breathing, or maybe some other things that would be relevant to you exactly at that moment. And I find this invaluable versus kind of being stuck in that emotion for hours and hours. And by the way, off topic, but naturally, each emotion should be experienced in I guess, animals and humans for 90 seconds. Whatever goes more than 90 seconds, like we're stuck, and we need to help ourselves to get unstuck. Two more things in terms of increasing capacity. One is another using balloon example. If there's a pressure applied to that surface and it can pop, we can increase the surface, right? We can ask for help. We can use the same amount of pressure to be distributed across 2, 3, 5 balloons, and then we're able to sustain that. The Last one to remind here is the physical part. I've been asking our clients how they deal with big stress that comes with running big events, and the most common theme was doing the morning workout, walking a dog, taking a stroll after work for an hour, all of these physical things that help us to get out of our mind into our body, and sometimes it's useful to remind ourselves of that. The last topic on increasing our capacity here, I'm going to demonstrate what I would call an overload, a consequence of small external stressors that by themselves, they're not that big, but let's see where they lead. So imagine you just had your morning meetings, had 3 back-to-back meetings, you're planning to take the notes and kind of think of the next steps, and at the same moment, you're receiving an urgent Slack message from your senior leader that they need help exactly with that task. That same moment, your phone is ringing, vibrating because your partner is saying that your child has been injured in school. It's something minor, but something that you definitely need to respond to and worry about. And then at the same moment, you do that gesture and you realize, okay, I didn't wash my hair this morning. Okay, great. So by themselves, none of these things are big problems. If someone were to ask you in that moment, how do you feel? Maybe you'd say I'm a little bit stressed. One way to reduce that level immediately is to list out all of these things that are going on in your mind. So essentially just write down 5 things that I just described. Then you set priorities. And there's so many ways to set priorities. There's Eisenhower matrix, there are advanced techniques. I know one method that works 100%, I guarantee you already know, and it just works. Because it's simple, it's just 3 buckets. You categorize these items into a bucket of must, should, and could. You would tackle the must first, which will definitely reduce the overall pressure and load at that moment. You would then start focusing on the shoulds, and definitely during the day, like this is never ending list, so you just kind of separate these things as they come to you in the day in these 3 different buckets, and most of the time you should be spending in the should. And then whatever went in the could, maybe you would get to some of those things. Maybe you won't, but the benefit is that you will not feel bad in the end of the day, because you know you focused on all of your shoulds and you've done the musts, and who goes home with everything done? No one. External stress. The other way we can deal with external stress is actually reducing some of that. And you may argue with me, okay, well, a lot of these things I don't control. That's true, but some we do. So to give you very, very small examples, how many of you have consciously chose the sound of your alarm clock? Raise your hand. Okay, awesome, most of you. That's great. Those of you who don't, this is how you start your day. This is a little nuisance externally that makes you feel uncomfortable in the morning. Why not to make this stress a little bit less if possible? Your commute, for those who are driving to work, how long does it take on average? Like say, typically it's supposed to be a 30-minute commute, but have you measured for 95% of cases, how long does it actually take? So maybe there are some of those days when it takes 45. You can make 45 as your typical morning routine, very 95% of times. You would be on time. Yes, there's still going to be some outliers, but let's not worry about that. We can deal with that in a moment. But for these 45 minutes, you'll be fully present, you'll observe the nature, you maybe smile to a neighbor, you will most likely come earlier, you'll have time for that Starbucks, and maybe having a chat with your colleague that you haven't talked to in a long time. It's going to really set you for success, and if you think for the 50-minute difference only, on a scale of a day, makes huge difference. So. There are definitely other ways to think about this, but one more exercise I would suggest here, just keep the list of all these external nuisances or problems that are repetitive, and once you have that list, or you keep adding to this list, 2 ways to deal with this, obviously tackle them if possible, or what's also very effective, if you recognize this as stress, but then you actually assessed that it's not worth dealing with this, you can practice what's called committed acceptance, where my car steering is not perfectly aligned, it's a little bit bugging me, but don't want to invest hours of my time going to a mechanical shop and taking care of this. So maybe not. For some people, maybe yes. For some people, maybe not. enough about external stress. Let's talk about the noise, because that's a really cool topic I think we could all relate to. What is that noise, right? That little voice that we have in our mind, quite often negatively biased, sometimes uncontrollable, that most of people can relate to. I personally suggest to think of this as not something who we are, because there is so much more to us. It doesn't matter what's happening in our mind, it's actually the actions we take. It's physically how we feel emotionally inside about what's going on in our life. It's the relationship we have, it's our spirit, it's so many things that make us who we are that we should not be identifying with the noise. And I think it's just that concept itself helps a lot. The bigger one and more practical that has been around since 50s can be called different ways. Some people call it brain dump. You can call it free writing, essentially. And it's a perfect way to do this early in the morning. As soon as you woke up, before you do anything else, you open a blank sheet of paper, and I encourage you to do it on paper instead of screen. We have enough screen time in a day as is. You will not be coming back to that list either. It's really just allowing to recognize everything that's going on, reflection of what happened yesterday, maybe some worry about what's coming up, maybe something you almost forgot about, but you're going to write it down at that moment. It is possible you would go back and look on the list and circle back the things that are worth coming back to, but at the same time, it's really about the exercise of acknowledging that the things are going on, and it helps you to feel a bit more free. On a personal level, I can share that I've been doing exercises with a trainer twice a week, and it was first thing in the morning. By the time I do this, I would feel there's so many things going on in my mind about the day that I felt so bad that I'm not really listening, I'm not fully present, I'm kind of wasting money by pretending to be doing exercises, but thinking about so many things at the same time. Once I started doing that exercise, before I start my day, it definitely doesn't take all of the thoughts in your mind, and it's not like all thoughts are bad, but it takes away a lot of the noise. The noise. Okay, so we talked about writing it out in the morning, great. The other way to manage this is, obviously sometimes these thoughts are productive. Not everything is noise, but it's still, it may not be timely. So say you set up 30 minutes to work on this client project where you, at the minute 25, you're almost finished, but now you just thought about something else you need to do for that other project. What do you do? Are you going to open that file and make a note there? Are you going to try to ignore that thought and power through for 5 minutes, but that idea will keep kind of distracting you from your productivity? The best way is to have a separate list for all of these random things. I really like cars. So in my case, I call it a parking lot. You can call it a drawer, you can call it a chest. But essentially, if you think about the old computers from like 90s, I don't know how they work these days, but back then you had your computer chip, which is our brain, you had your storage, and you had your operating memory. So essentially what I'm suggesting to do is remove that item from your operating memory and put it in storage. This way you can be so much more focused on what you're doing right now, be more present, and reduce stress. This is what we're really talking about here. Another practical suggestion to do exactly that would be, imagine you're driving and you just had that thought. How many of you are using Siri to make reminders as you drive? Okay, great. Well, that could be a good tip for the rest of you. Essentially, I'm not sure how the native feature works, but the way I'm doing this, I'm driving home and I'm just realizing I forgot to change the oil. What I'm going to do is I'll say, hey Siri, please send a text message to myself. What would you like to say? I need to change oil. Would you like to send it? Yes. It's safe. I don't need to go distract. Oh, it's responding to me now. Yeah. Oh, what would you like to send? Nothing, thank you. It's amazing, like I've used it a lot, and it definitely, again, allows you to reduce that noise from your operating brain and then probably have a better experience driving home. I think that's it on the noise. yeah. So we talked about 4 types of stress today, really focus on this low-intensity one. If you think about this, obviously trauma is much bigger than what I shared today, and it's not a topic for our conversation, but it doesn't happen really very often. It doesn't happen to everyone at a certain point in life, but probably 99% of life, we don't operate in that stress quadrant. Most of the time, we're dealing with low-intensity, external, or internal challenges. The good news is we can affect this, unlike trauma. We can increase our capacity to manage stress. We can reduce it where possible, and we can learn better ways to manage the noise. One last balloon. We used it as an example of stress today quite a lot, which is fair, but let's think of this as an example of your well-being and mental health, and instead of pressuring it, let's just use it something that you can have fun with. I appreciate and thank you, all of you joining me today. Definitely want to give credit to Mo Gaudat and Alice Law, the authors of the book Unstressable, some of the concepts of which I have borrowed today. And definitely want to be a resource, so if there's anything that I share that resonated with you, or if I can help you in my professional or personal capacity, feel free to reach out. And it sounds like we still have a few minutes here for if you have any Q&A. And yeah, we're right there at the Event Mobi booth as well, so you're also welcome to drop by anytime. Thank you.